So we are in a state of change, and for me it's a super exciting change. We are about 2 weeks away from the 1st of September, which in Cape Town doesn't mean spring, it means unpredictability. But what we need to do is we need to start getting the vegetable garden and food forest ready for when spring arrives, so that we can just have our gardens explode with an abundance of summer growth. In this video, I'm going to take you along for 10 things that I do every year when it comes to getting ready for spring, so that you can see what I'm doing. Some of it might be relevant to you, some of it not. Use the chapters in the video to skip through sections that you don't find relevant, but come along, join me on my journey as I show you some of the things that I do to get ready for the spring season. The very first thing you need to do is to start planning what you want to plant and also start planting. I have actually started my squash and pumpkin seeds off about 3 weeks ago, just to give them a super early start. I'm getting my first set of true leaves. They're going to go into the garden today still. What we have here is green Hubbard, some horned cucumbers, jackpea little pumpkins, sweet dumpling, delicata. So there's a whole bunch of pumpkin and squash varieties here. And the reason these are started so early is because of the fruit fly. I want them to be able to set fruit, get pollinated, so I can get them bagged up in stockings before the fruit fly come and decimates my crop. Then I've also got some determinate tomatoes on the go, so that I can have multiple crops of them. By the time the first flush of determinate tomatoes are done, I would already have my indeterminate varieties growing up vines. So it's a nice early start to the tomato season. So what you need to be doing is planting all of your long season crops as early as possible, just to give you a head start. So to me, the second most important thing to do as spring preparation for the winter vegetable and food forest garden is fruit fly control. I've done quite a few videos on the Ceratrap solution, which uses a hydrolysized protein bait, which only attracts the female fruit fly. And the most important thing when it comes to fruit flies is getting an early start. So don't wait until you start seeing fruit fly damage to try and solve the problem. Get it done now. Late August is when your traps should go out. So as those fruit flies emerge from the soil, they are lured to protein-rich bait, and you can catch them and hopefully extend your growing season that little bit longer before they start decimating your crops. The Ceratrap is basically just a lid with a couple of holes on a plastic jar. You put it on, hang it in fruit trees and all over the garden, and it works incredibly well. I'll tag some videos up for you and put them in the description of how well they work. And because you can just reuse this, what you do to make things even more cost effective is you can get a 20-liter refill. Now, what the refill allows you to do is obviously minimize your waste, so you're not just consuming and throwing away every season. You're actually just repurposing things, and it allows you to top up throughout the season as well. You don't need to buy multiple iterations of a different product. You just buy the refill. 6, 7, 8 weeks in, you can top it up, you can throw the liquid out, top it up again. It's a very, very versatile solution. So pretty much just take the liquid, pour it in, pretty much full. Take your lid, turn it on, put the hook through, and there you have fruit fly bait done. Go and hang these in your trees. I'm going to actually hang one in every single tree just to make sure that I'm covered, but make sure you get on top of your fruit fly as soon as possible. The third most important thing to be doing right now before spring arrives is to prune your fruit trees and any of the other trees or shrubs. Berries that are also one of those that have to be pruned before the summer heat sets in. I actually pruned mine last week, but this really is your last chance because most of them you should be seeing those vegetative buds, meaning the growth buds, starting to break or elongate, and the flower buds should be opening within the next week or two. Here I have a nectarine, there I have an apricot, and right in front of you in the screen is a pear. These have all been pruned the way they need to be pruned for summer. So now is the last chance, so get onto it. And then what we have is our winter harvesting and pruning, which is still carrying on. That is a beautiful rutabaga. We move over to lovely cabbage, another cabbage, and another beautiful cabbage. We then move over to our pak choys and nasturtiums, and there are a whole bunch of things. We hop over here to a huge amount of celery with some nasturtiums, keeping them safe. So you can see there's a lot that still needs to be harvested and enjoyed in the winter garden. So don't forget about those during all of the craziness which is summer garden preparation. And then a really valuable lesson that I learned is squeeze in some extra winter crops. This is pak choy, tatsoi, both green and red tatsoi. We have some more cabbages. These you can very easily still squeeze in additional crops before the heat sets in. We've got at least another 6 weeks, which is enough for most of these to give you a last little winter squeeze of nice juicy green crops before the summer heat kicks in. And the next one, which is also really important, is mulching and fertilizing. More so mulching, but what I've done here is I've put on a really thick layer of fine mulch. And why I like fine mulch is it's a lot of organic matter, lots of wooden sticks and pieces of wood and coca-cola and whatever the case may be, but there's a lot of material in there which then feeds the earthworms, the grubs, all of the natural microbes in the soil. Love all of that woody material. So I put a nice thick layer of mulch on, and then what I do every single change of season is I add in a nice thick layer of seaweed chips, more as a soil conditioner to add in some of those micronutrients. I use worm tea watered down for the garden, and then also ducks, chicken manure from the chicken garden. That is my main source of fertilizer. But as the soil is still really moist from the winter rains, don't forget to mulch early before summer heat kicks in, before your soil dries, which then makes it a bit more difficult to get that soil nice and soaked again to be able to layer on mulch. The next thing you should be doing right now is cuttings. These are 2 mulberries, and I've got another 4 or 5 in the greenhouse that are just busy setting some roots. These I took about 3 weeks ago, so it's still a really good time to take cuttings. And what I'm actually going to do is this beautiful elderberry over here, I want to plant a whole bunch of these out to the chickens. They love the leaves. When the elderberries form, they drop. The chickens and the ducks absolutely love them. So right now I'm going to be taking a snip, and I can get a whole bunch of elderberry plants from this. It's also a great time to take your perennial plants, things like your garlic, basil, anything that lemongrass, as I look around here, chilies if they are sprouting from the bottom out, anything that is forming multiple stems from within the ground or is clumping. Now is a really good time to take those, divide them out and propagate them so that you can take one plant and end up spreading it and sharing it throughout the garden. Cuttings and dividings, time is now. Something that is very easily overlooked is your pathways. Don't forget about them. Your pathways are huge nutrient creators. They break down. So use your pathways to build up organic matter, to hold water and nutrients for the plants that are on either side of your walkway. But something that is not often spoken about but can add significant amount of value. Look after your walkways, mulch them, add wood chips, add straw, hay, whatever you want to do, but bulk up your walkways. Another thing to consider, and that you need to be keeping in mind this time of the year, I don't want that, is moisture within your soil. Spring and early summer is a really tricky time when it comes to watering. You've really got to know the makeup of your soil in terms of its moisture retention and moisture loss. But what you want to do is make sure that you're not underwatering and you're not overwatering. So things to consider is the actual temperature, wind, rainfall. During the spring to summer crossover point, you don't want to be overwatering, which will inhibit the uptake of nutrients by plants, and you obviously don't want to overwater them, that you end up drowning them. So when it comes to watering, keep a very, very close eye on the moisture levels in your soil and make sure that you're doing the right thing for the right time of the year. Then it's something that drives me absolutely batty. If you do any form of online search, and so many videos that you can watch on getting your vegetable garden and food forest ready for spring, pretty much the first thing they're going to tell you is pull out every single weed you can find. And those are the same people and websites that are struggling with slugs, with worms, with snails, with all of these things busy eating the plants. They're also the ones struggling with bare soil, with evaporation, with nutrient deficiencies, all of those things. Stop removing every single weed. Weeds are nutrient miners. They are soil correctors. They are not stealing nutrients. They are busy fixing something that is deficient in the soil. If you have dandelions, for instance, you might have a specific deficiency, or you might have compact soil. Dandelions only show up when certain soil conditions are right, meaning deficiency. So don't go and pull every single weed out. Leave them. Give food to slugs, snails, worms that is not your veggies. I can take you through the garden here and you can see the main crop hasn't been touched by snails, slugs or worms. A little bit on the bottom leaves, but there are weeds all over the beds. If you want to remove your weeds, cut them, drop them, leave the root mass in the ground, depending on the type of weed. And I'll pull one out to show you as an example. This one, you can see, has a really dense root structure. So if I go and pull all of these out, what it's doing is I have sandy soil. That weed is busy binding my soil together. I go and pull it out and I just go back to where I was with sandy, loose soil that drains nutrients and loses moisture. As soon as I keep that weed in there, let it naturally die off, those roots are going to stay there. They're going to hold the soil, and as I keep getting those roots from weeds to keep growing, the soil ultimately becomes firmer, more nutrient rich, and is correcting itself. So be cautious about the advice given by removing every single weed. Look at your environment, look at your problems, and make smart choices. So what on earth am I doing with a window and a broken window? Well, this window was due to a little trip to the dump. It was for free. There is nothing wrong with it. It's sturdy, it's solid. But this window is going to form the foundation of my next thing I'm going to be focusing on for summer and spring preparation, which is building a solar dehydrator. I don't want to be buying these hugely expensive dehydrators that need to be plugged in and use a whole bunch of electricity when we have the sun. The sun is free. One of the big parts of building a solar dehydrator is you need a pretty big clear surface area for the sun to penetrate. I then am going to go back to the dump and I'll do a video on this to get a metal sheet at the back. We'll create some racks, create an angle, and voila, every morning or whenever the case may be, put it out, put the veggies, flowers, herbs, fruit into it, dehydrate it, and suddenly I end up with a whole bunch of storing facilities that I would have otherwise needed to use electricity. So this is my 9th tip and the 9th thing I'm going to be doing in preparation for spring. The other one is what I'm actually sitting on, and those are bricks. The last thing I'm going to be doing, because I don't want to overload myself with jobs, with families, with everything else going on, is I'm going to build a rocket stove. Those things are insane. And if you couple it with the correct pots and pans, you can pretty much in summer be outdoors cooking all of your meals and using zero energy. So I prune the trees in the garden and the food forest all the time. So that's free fuel for the rocket stove. Then once I've used it, I'm going to be left with ash. That ash is then going to go back into the garden to add nutrients back in. You can see how we're busy closing the loop. We're not busy wasting, we're not throwing away. We're busy turning everything we use into a source of replenishment back into the earth and the ground that we took it from. So 2 DIY projects ending off what I'm going to be doing in preparation for spring and summer. So that was a mouthful. It's 10 things I'm busy doing in the garden right now to get me ready for spring. It's also 10 things that you could and maybe should be doing. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got some value out of it. Maybe you learned something new that you maybe have been overlooking. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please share it with your communities, and here's to hoping that summer 2022/2023 is going to be insane. Until next time, happy growing.